Alright, so I've got my original image here in Corel PSPx7. The first thing you want to do is duplicate your background layer. I've already labeled this my original. I'm going to call this my blur layer, and then I'm going to blur it. Go to Adjust, Blur, Gaussian Blur. I'm going to set this to 4. You want to just barely blur it to where you're starting to lose detail in the face, any deep details. Hit OK, copy merged, paste it as a new layer, go back to your original image and just delete that blur layer for now. And so now I've got my blur layer and the original image, and what I'm going to do is go to Image, Negative for my blur layer. I'm going to go back to Image. I'm going to go to Arithmetic, and Image 7 here is my negative image with the blur. Image 2 is my original image. Function is set to additive. All channels is selected, divisor of 2, and you may have to play around with the bias to get the exposure of your detail layer just right. I find 0 works for this image. For instance, if I was to go to 50 here, it would be too bright, and I would have to either adjust the brightness on that layer inside the image, or redo the arithmetic by putting this to 0, or whatever the appropriate number would be. Alright, so I'm going to hit OK here. And now I've got my detail layer. I'm going to copy that. And let me shrink these. And I'm going to paste that as a new layer. Set it to hard light. Alright. And now we can see that it even adds more detail than was there previously. You could just kind of see it in the hair here. Especially, you can see how I'm adding more detail and sharpness. Alright. So I want to go to this detail layer, name it, and I'm going to, before I duplicate it, I'm going to go to Adjust, Hue Saturation and Lightness, and just drop the saturation all the way down so it's just shades of gray. I'm going to duplicate it. You see it added even more detail to my face. Now I'm going to merge this down. So now I've got a very detailed detail layer. It's adding a tremendous amount of detail to my face, making me look even worse. Right. So now I'm going to duplicate my original image. I'm going to do that twice. This is going to be my blur layer, and this is going to be my merge layer. Alright, so now I'm going to go to my blur layer, and you could, using your lasso tool, just select areas of similar brightness and blur them individually, which will probably give you a much better look, more realistic look. So you want to blur these a lot more than you did previously in the previous step. So you can go up to something like 20 or 50, I'll select 20. But you see it's extremely blurred, right? So I put on my detail layer, you can see what the skin looks like there. So I'm actually going to back out of that by using Control Z and go all the way back to the beginning, and I'm just going to select the whole face just for time's sake. But again, you could just go around selecting portions of the face based on their brightness or light tonality. So I'm just going to do the whole face. Adjust again, blur, Gaussian blur. I'm going to do 20, hit OK, deselect, and then I'm going to erase the areas that I did not want to blur. Alright, so I'm blur in some of this, or erase back in some of this hair and this detail here. That should not have been. Affected. And then I've got to erase in the eyes. Put on my detail layer so I can see what I'm working with here. Alright. So I'm erasing back in the eyes by getting rid of that detail layer. I'm sorry, the blur layer in these areas. And before I even started the video, I did go through this image and do some big blemish cleanups, you know, if I had a big mark or a cut or whatever on my face. So definitely do that before you do this process, just like you normally would. Cloning and healing, that kind of thing. Let's see if I'm missing this. Yeah. Alright, so I've got my eyes erased back in, my eyebrows, and now with this blur layer, I find that just setting it to lighten really helps that detail in the skin show up. And basically, that's the end of the process. Of course, you could play with your layers to say, okay, well, that's too much detail. I want it to be even softer. I don't mind it being too hard. So, you know, just find out what your preference is, how realistic you want it to look. And you could even go on your detail layer here. You notice how sharp everything looks, and it might add a bit of grain. So you can go on your detail layer and erase that out, or put a mask on it and clean things up a bit. I kind of like the sharpen effect, and I'd rather just go in there after these are merged and fix those eyes that way. So I'm going to merge all these visible. And now we can see the final effect. So you're going to see like these shadows and all these blemishes and things. They really got cleaned up quite a bit here. So yeah, I look terrible, and now I look way better than I do in real life, thanks to frequency separation. It evened out my skin tone, sharpened my hair, sharpened the eyes, sharpened the eyebrows. So a really nice effect. And you know, if you're like me and you came in from hunting, you took this picture and you look terrible, you can do a lot with a little with a technique like this. So anyway, thanks for watching. I hope that helps.